Welcome to today's video. Today we're going to talk about chemical reactions, or I shorten it to RXN for reaction. Essentially, a chemical reaction is the rearrangement of atoms. So when we rearrange atoms, we're breaking and forming new bonds, and that's going to determine if our process is exothermic or endothermic. Essentially, what we're looking at in this area is bond enthalpy. You guys remember when we added up the enthalpies of bonds breaking and bonds forming? That's where we're going to get exo and endothermic. We're not really going to focus on this too much. We're going to get to the more general information right now. So first of all, one of the ways that we can tell if atoms are going to be rearranged or if they are rearranging, here are five indications that it's happening, but there are more. These are just five examples. If you see bubbles, that means a gas is being produced, something is changing. But when you talk about the production of gas, there's a difference between boiling something like water and having a reaction between vinegar and baking soda. You see bubbles in both, but one is a chemical change, the other is merely a physical change. When you boil water, it stays water, it doesn't change anything. We can produce a solid. Again, this is different than freezing, okay? And you're gonna see a lot of this when we get to precipitation reactions. There's a temperature change, you could see a flame, and there can be a change of color. This one's always a little bit tricky because it depends on what you're working with, but it is an indication that something is definitely going on. When we talk chemical reactions, there's three ways that we're gonna write them down. And those three are skeleton equations, word equations, and then we're gonna be balancing equations. Skeleton equations are what you're probably most familiar with. You see the symbols for the elements, and then the arrow, and then what you formed. And we'll do, in the next video, you'll see what balancing equations is all about. Word equations can be very difficult because it's a description of what's actually happening, all right? And again, in the next video, we're gonna see an example of each of these, which isn't gonna be too hard. But before we get there, we need to indicate states of matter, all right? There's definitely a distinct difference between solid water and liquid water and gaseous water. We need to indicate that in the reaction, all right? So we put a little S next to something for solid. We put an L for liquid, G for gas, and then an important one here is AQ, all right? AQ indicates that something is aqueous, it's dissolved in water. And that becomes very important with things like acids or salts or anything, virtually anything that can dissolve in water, all right? So here's our introduction to chemical reactions. In the next video, we're gonna do some balancing a chemical reaction.